Okay, welcome everyone. Could we try to get rid of echo? Should we test that again? We're just going to pause for a moment and try to get rid of our echo. Testing this again. Fixed. Thank you so much, Jeff. Okay, welcome everyone. Before we call to order our regular meeting of council, I just want to note for everyone's awareness that we are planning a committee of the whole meeting, which will be for Thursday, September 14th at 6 p.m. I've been told by staff, so just making the public aware of that, and it will be posted, if it isn't already, on our site in our regular manner. So calling to order our regular meeting of council, and we'll start by just appreciating and recognizing that we are holding our meeting today on the unceded traditional territories of the Hupechesit and Sechot First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items from councillors? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't really have a late item, but I would like to start this meeting by saying aloha to all of the individuals in Maui that are affected by the fire. I know we have fires across BC, across Canada, and they are across the world. This was a particularly tragic event, and I just wanted to extend our city's condolences to that city. Thank you.
Thank you very much for saying that. And any late items from staff today?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And just wanted to recognize as well that Councillor Douglas couldn't be here today for personal reasons. Hopefully he'll be back with us at the next meeting. Moving on to item B, adoption of minutes. We have minutes from the special meeting held at noon and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on July 10th, 2023 as presented. Somebody moved to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. No delegations today, no unfinished business. Moving on to reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated August 14, 2023 be received and checks numbered 153071 to 153316 inclusive in payment of accounts totaling $4,586,913.44 be approved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments or questions on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And item number 2 for reports, we have our RCMP detachment report from Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson. Welcome.
Perfect. Madam Mayor and councillors, thank you for inviting me to deliver the report this afternoon. In the interest of time, I'm wondering if perhaps I could address some questions first. I know that that was a format that we had last time, and it seemed like it was particularly useful for the councillors. So I'd open it up to questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions from councillor to get started with? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the officer. I always am interested in the numbers that these reports display. But what I'm wondering is if, in your opinion, or the opinion of anyone else at the detachment, there might be a improved or different way of bringing reports before council that actually, instead of just comparing numbers, which I find helpful to an extent, but might be more helpful in communicating the successes and/or concerns of the detachment to the city?
Yeah, the easy answer is yes. I think that there's always room to improve, and certainly, I guess that's part of the reason why I chose to take questions is because I think the narrative is so much more important in some instances than just the single numbers. That's certainly something that we can explore for the next meeting, absolutely. Part of that also, I guess, feeds into some of the meetings that I have directly with the mayor or that my predecessor, Inspector Rochette, had with the mayor. And so there's sort of a balance between that, but I'm absolutely willing to explore that for next meeting if that's something that the council would like to see.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see some of these numbers are slowly starting to creep up to pre-COVID levels. So I was wondering if you could think of any initiatives that the city could support in order to bring those calls of service down. And one idea I had, we used to give money to the facade improvement program every year, which was, I think, $50,000, which we no longer use. But maybe we could take that $50,000 and put it towards some kind of crime prevention program or something that the residents can do? Is there any thought, have you got any ideas for that?
Yeah, on the spot, I would say that probably the issues that are affecting the community are not that dissimilar from other communities: poverty, homelessness, addictions. So many of the calls for service that we deal with are sort of outside the periphery of the police, but as a consequence of being the agency of last resort, I guess, we often are dealing with some of those. I think if there was a fund for that, certainly youth, there's programs related to youth and sort of the intersection of homelessness and addiction, that we could certainly work on. I think it would require a bit of additional thought and maybe some consultation with members of council to determine where their focus, where their interests are focused. But certainly happy to meet with council and the mayor to discuss that for sure.
Perfect. Keep your ideas coming and we'll certainly be receptive to them.
Always happy to accept funds to better the community for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
I have a quick question regarding the merchants. Well, there's been a lot of merchants that have had a lot of shoplifters in, right? And they're really frustrated because they figure, why report it? Because they don't feel the RCMP is doing anything or enough. So my question is, maybe you could explain the process. What happens? Do you answer every call, or how does the process work?
Yeah, sure. I think just by way of background, it's important to sort of look at it not only as shoplifting as an issue, but sort of the broader calls for service. And so with a finite number of resources working each shift, we obviously have to triage our responses. And the majority of the focus is on victim-based crimes. So if there was an assault, that would certainly take priority over a shoplifting as an example. Unfortunately, part of the issue with shoplifting generally is that by the time that we are called, by the time that we're called, the person is typically gone from the store. And so I would encourage shop owners to connect with our community safety resources that we have. Dave Cousson's an excellent resource on environmental design, crime reduction through environmental design. Ex-RCMP officer and does a lot in the community for the community safety portfolio. But he's certainly somebody that would be able to connect with people in terms of how to design the store to prevent some shoplifting. If there's unfortunately, we can't be in the store all the time, but if there's some stores that are hit more than others, then certainly I would encourage those stores to have security, cameras, anything that we could use to provide some evidence of an offense. So in general terms, we prioritize our calls for service, and if shoplifting is, if we've had 5 calls for service and that shoplifting call will get an immediate response. If we've had 35 calls for service, it may end up being triaged lower in the number of where we can get to them, maybe in a day or 2 days. So.
Thank you. I know a lot of people are sharing videos. I mean, they do record and they do share that recording with other people or other merchants. And there has been discussion, hey, they're about to enter your store, and they communicate back and forth. I've seen it posted, and because I share a page with them. But by the way, the Cameron Lake, the two guys you guys picked up, perfect, the shoplifters there. And I find that the shoplifters are, when you see what they're shoplifting, they're getting bolder and who cares? Call the police and they walk out with the merchandise. And they don't care anymore. They're just taking the items, It's not like the big shopping bag, let's hide it there. They're just walking out with the items. And I understand that the merchants are getting frustrated and there has to be more because their bottom line, they're not making any money, with all the shoplifting, and it's frustrating. I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate and share the frustrations with the merchants. We, the police service is also frustrated that that seems to be something that we're having difficulty dealing with. But the reality is that the expectations of the community are that we focus on the most serious and violent crimes. And so, those calls for service often end up taking several days to respond to. But it's difficult, but I do think it feeds into, again, just this discussion about homelessness and addiction and people who are trying to get money are often doing it through property crimes, shoplifting, to be able to facilitate a certain lifestyle. And I will say now that our crime reduction unit was absent a couple of people for a period of time, and we're now at full strength. So I'm optimistic that as the summer months, the calls for service slow down, that we can focus on some areas like shoplifting. We've also got a number of people who want to see traffic enforcement, enhanced traffic enforcement, those types of things that, are an irritant to the people in the community, but unfortunately we can't always get to right away. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, anything you want to highlight from your report?
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would somebody like to move receipt? Okay, lovely. Moved by Councillor Neely, seconded by Councillor Dane. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, on to bylaws. Item number 1, we have the zoning bylaw for number 5074-2023, bylaw modernization, and this is third reading. I've got Scott, if you'd like to give an overview.
I just wanted to quickly reiterate that, we've been working on this for about the last 8 or 9 months, and council was given this first and second reading. We've had the public hearing on July 31st. Council's now being asked to consider third reading, and because we've talked about this a fair bit, I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you have as you consider third reading.
Thank you. Are there any new questions on this? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is not a question so much as a comment, and this is a comment specifically with regards to the updated phrases in 6.15.6, which is the bylaw that concerns home occupation. And the change is, there is a change, it says in multi-unit residential zones, home occupation as a permitted use is restricted to office space. Currently, there's no restrictions on home occupations and what they should entail, except for compliance with the remainder of section 6.15. Now, later on in the agenda, there is a discussion about this issue specifically, but since this issue specifically is being reflected in a third reading of the bylaw, I have raised it now, in that an issue arose in July, around the 17th, that was brought forward by Councillor Dame with regards to what home occupation is and should be allowed and whether or not business licenses are issued for it. It seemed at the time, on a non-official basis of discussion, that generally council was in support of home occupations, and certainly that's the way the bylaw reads at the moment. This section would restrict home occupations and only in multi-unit residential zones, which is not defined. So I'm not sure whether that's R1 or R2. And it also seems to me that this is a change that is contrary to what appears to be the desire of council to set policy. So I am, without any changes to that, I wouldn't support third reading of this. I would if that section was removed and subject to further discussion specifically by council.
Thank you. Scott?
So when we did look we did not do an extensive look at the home occupation regulations. This is a minor change. It's related to essentially home occupations in a multifamily, so in an apartment type setting, not in a home occupations in a single family dwelling scenario. It's so in an apartment building. There's been some further clarification to limit the types of home occupation in an apartment type multifamily setting. That's what this clause is to be done. We did not do an extensive look at the home occupation guidelines. We didn't, because that would need in my opinion, a very strong engagement with our residents, our commercial businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, to have that wider discussion. So that's why the majority of the home occupation regulations did not change in this way, with the exception of this minor one that's related to narrow the focus a little bit in a multifamily setting, i.e. an apartment type setting, just for council's clarification.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, when you say apartment type setting, I know that it's not defined as that, it's defined as multi-unit residential zone, so I assume that would include townhouses and other similar strata type situations.
It would include things that are in our multifamily zone. So you're right, if it was a fourplex in our multifamily zone, that would be included in the circumstances, you're right.
Thank you. And if somebody wanted to remove that portion of what we're passing today, what would the process be for that?
In my opinion, council would have to make that motion. We would need to have another public hearing because we are changing a portion of the bylaw. And in my opinion, we would need to re-advertise and have another public hearing with that section deleted or moved back to what the original bylaw said.
Thank you. Councillor Patola?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And not to second guess Mr. Smith, because he is very knowledgeable in these matters. I wonder if in fact we couldn't just proceed because we're not making a new change, we're removing a proposed change.
Again, in my opinion, the public hearing was held on this bylaw that council is now considering at third reading. So the language of the bylaw, that was what was advertised. That's what the public was potentially asked to communicate to council on. So that is, it's not that council is now considering making a change to that. The public technically did not have, they weren't being asked about that. So in my opinion, we would have to, we could get legal advice, but in my opinion, if council wanted to make that change, what they absolutely are able to do, we would need to hold another public hearing with that change. So you would go back, you would amend it at second reading, we would set another public hearing date.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Would somebody like to read third reading? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that zoning bylaw number 5074/2023 be read a third time.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Moved by Councillor Mealy. Any further comments on this? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just think at this point, and first of all, kudos to staff, Mr. Smith, for all the hard work you've put into all these little changes, not little changes, sorry, I apologize, I shouldn't say that, all these changes. I think we can still accommodate the discussion with what Councilor Patola is saying afterwards and make the changes. I think we're just, no sense in throwing the baby out with the bathwater with all these changes that have been done and all the work that has been done. I think we can have that discussion separately and we can move on with this.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item number 2, Waterworks and Sewer Bylaw Amendments 2023. And this is final adoption. Would somebody like to? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Waterworks Bylaw number 5088, 2023 be now finally adopted, signed by the Mayor and Corporate Officer and numbered 5088.
I'll second that.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any comments? Seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And if you want to continue, Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Sewer Connection Regulation Bylaw number 5089, 2023 be now finally adopted, signed by the Mayor and Corporate Officer numbered 5089.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Moving on to correspondence for action. We have one item today, and that is a letter dated July 7th, 2023 from the Alberni District Fall Fair Association requesting access to city streets for the Fall Fair Parade. Councillor Solda, would you like to read this?
Madam Mayor, I move that the Alberni District Fall Fair, yes. Madam Mayor, I move that the council authorize the Alberni District Fall Fair Association access to the city streets on Saturday, September 9th, 2023, from 11 a.m. to approximately 12 p.m. for the purpose of a parade from 12th Avenue down Bird Street and along 10th Avenue to Alderwood Street, subject to the notification of emergency services and BC Transit, consultation with the affected businesses and residents, city-approved traffic safety plan, including qualified traffic control personnel as required, and provision of the standard liability insurance in the amount of $5 million.
Thank you. So, seconded by Councillor Mealy, and I just want to comment or ask a question possibly. I think usually we give them authorization for more than just the hour of the parade because there's the marshalling area for an hour or so, possibly even more before. It's a minor thing, but just want to make sure that we're not going to end up not accommodating that or asking them to come back to council for additional request.
Through the chair, I think it'll just be handled through a street permit. So we're able to make that change as staff knows that council's direction is to support this event.
Great, thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Fox. I see the provision of standard liability insurance in the amount of $5 million. And it seems to me that that's what we almost always ask for. But I've never actually asked the question, is that a cumulative policy or a per incident policy? And I ask that because certainly $5 million, one would assume, would be enough to cover one incident. But should 2 or 3 arise, that may not be sufficient.
Through the chair, I believe it is not cumulative, it's per event, and it's additionally insured. So it's just listing us on it. So when there is any type of liability or claim that MIA represents us on.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was wondering if staff would be willing to contact the Industrial Heritage Society and ask them they could put in a couple of vehicles and maybe council could ride in the trucks and be part of the parade. It is a great celebration and it's fun to be a part of it.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion then to support, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Moving on to proclamations, we have one from Island Kids Cancer Association. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read this one?
Thank you. I'd like to move that council proclaim the month of September 2023 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in Port Alberni.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And the next one from the International Wrongful Conviction Day Committee. Councillor Dane, would you like to read this one?
Certainly, thank you. I move that council proclaim October 2nd, 2023 as Wrongful Conviction Day in Port Alberni.
Thank you. Moved by Counselor Dame, seconded by Counselor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And correspondence for information, we have a whole bunch today. So I will go to our corporate officer to read it out or highlight it. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, first off, we have the request for secondary access route joint letter from the city, region, and First Nations to the provincial and federal governments. Union of BC municipalities, a letter from regarding what we're receiving for the Community Works Fund payment. Town of Ladysmith, iced tea letter of support. And then we have a quarterly report from the Office of the Ombudsperson. The District of Tofino submitted a letter on the economic impacts of the Cameron Bluffs wildfire. We also have a letter from Black Press Media in regards to Bill C-18. The Battered Women's Support Services Municipal Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence. A letter from the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General in regards to the Surrey Police Service transition. The Township of Spalumchin, my apologies, recycling program for antifreeze containers and used oil. Hoyat First Nations Tree Farm License 44 Uncut Disposition and Annual Allowable Cut Letter. We have the Build 2026 Strategic Plan and 2-year dashboard report from North Island College. And then we have various resolution submissions, as it's this time of year, from local governments that are taking resolutions to the 2023 UBCM convention, along with the various UBCM convention meeting invitations.
Thank you very much. Council, are there any items people would like to speak to or ask questions about? Councillor Solda.
I just want to bring up one, actually, they're all important, but I do want to bring up number F, Black Press Media, the Bill C-18. It's really frustrating because when I want to share information about our community, I can't because on Facebook, so it's really frustrating. I can't share that information. And because it's government, and I believe we should support it. Yes, there's times when I want to not so happy with the press, but, but it's the way it is. And I just need to see us able to share info, like even when it comes to like our road closure or anything like that. It's really hard. If the government has put it out, I can't share that information. So I'm really frustrated by that. And that's happened to me a few times when I found it's really important to have that information shared to our community, and we can't do it. And I just want to bring that forward, that we should write a letter in support. And I don't know if you want to make it a notice of motion, but I believe we should be supporting it. And because Facebook is mad at, or whoever's mad at each other, let's freeze them out and let's get over it.
Thank you. And I just wanted to note that I believe it's our October committee of the whole meeting, that the intent is to, I believe the staff can confirm, bring forward our communications plan and make it more of a fulsome committee of the whole, where we can invite media as well to join that conversation, so that we can really determine how do we want to support media that exists currently in sharing our information and that type of thing. So you certainly could create a formal notice of motion, but assuming that is coming to our, not the next COW, but the following one, it might be best to wait for that process.
So Madam Mayor, I'll be glad to wait for that process. I mean, it's not like we're going to need it tomorrow, but I would like it to happen. And the other thing too, I just realized I would like to talk about North Island College. I'm glad they have a plan in that, but as I was reading through it, there's nothing about updating what kind of courses are they going to bring to our community or anything, or to communities. In this sense, I'm talking about Port Alberni. So they need to have more, and we're talking about healthcare. We're talking about there is trades in that, but there needs to be more to our community. And I wish that was part of that whole plan. And I just wanted to voice that. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we could certainly request a meeting with North Island College. We do meet with them, at least I would say annually at government to government level, but we have other mechanisms. Councillor Douglas, I believe, is our representative on the Learning Council, which is a community group of kind of driving some of those decisions of what education options are being pursued for the Valley. But specifically lately with our healthcare worker shortage, I know there's been more conversation about more programs in the Valley, and might be time to just request another meeting and talk a bit more about their long-term strategic plan for how they're going to be utilizing the space here.
We don't need a motion on that, Madam Mayor, or that can be, or do we need a motion?
I think if we want it to be an all of council meeting, then we could make it as a motion.
Would you like that at the end or now?
You're welcome to make it now.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to, staff to send an invitation to North Island College to come and talk to us about programming at North Island College. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. No, that's fine. I think that's clear enough. Any comments on that? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, other items councillors would like to speak to in correspondence? Okay, I just want to comment on item A, which is request for secondary access route, a joint letter from the City of Port Alberni Regional District and First Nations to the provincial and federal governments. This is an initiative that the City of Port Alberni took on to arrange a group of all of the local governments affected by the road closures, as well as, or on our side of the road closures, there's other local governments who are affected by it, as well as all of the First Nations. And really the intent here was for us to get a mandate to work on trying to put a plan in place to make improvements, for the province to make improvements to the Horn Lake Connector so that that could be activated as our detour route when Highway 4 has to close. So we did get that mandate. We do have a letter that we jointly wrote to the province that has been signed on by the nations on the West Coast and in the Alberni Valley, as well as City of Port Alberni, Ucluelet, Tofino, and the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District. So we have requested a meeting, but ultimately we are saying that the current detour route is not usable for the average person on a daily basis when Highway 4 closes, and we're looking for immediate emergency improvements to Horn Lake Connector so that that road is able to be activated when Highway 4 closes. I believe we have had news come out from the province, or it's coming out shortly today, that the Highway 4 closure, 9 to 5's closure, is going to be longer than anticipated, which I don't think anyone is overly surprised by. We know that it's been a difficult job, and there's been a lot of unexpected challenges that have come with it. I think we all on council certainly appreciate all of the work that the province is doing to prioritize that work getting done, but in the event of closures, which have happened frequently, there's certainly a feeling from our local government, and I know the regional district as well, that the current detour is just not viable for a lot of people to drive, and especially in situations where the highway is being closed and announced at 8:30 at night. We can't be sending tourists or residents to drive the 3.5-hour detour in the dark. So we've had a lot of challenges in that sense. We really feel we need a more viable option, and we know that there's reasonably minimal improvements to the Horn Lake Connector that could be made in order to make it usable on a short-term basis. So that's what that letter is requesting, and we are looking forward to a response from the province, and we've had some proactive and good conversations with our MLA about it already. Any other items for today? Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel like maybe I would like to circle back to the letter from the Black Press Media regarding Bill C-18. They've made a couple of very specific requests in their letter. The first being that the city joins with the province of British Columbia and the federal and Quebec governments and stop advertising using Facebook and Instagram. And then the second is that we divert a portion of our advertising budget to invest in local news media. I believe that we are currently doing some amount of advertising, public notices and whatnot in the paper and on the radio, correct? Now, personally, I would be hesitant to stop using Facebook and Instagram as a means of public communication. Not that I support the decisions that Facebook and Instagram are making, but the operational value of being able to communicate through those means is just so high that I would be concerned what would replace that in the absence of those things. But maybe we could look at their second request to look at diverting a portion of our budget spent to local news media. I'm not sure if there would be support for that from the rest of council, but I would be interested to hear everyone else's thoughts.
Thank you. And we could certainly do that today. I think we also could talk about it as a part of the larger communications plan at the October Cal. Granted, that is a couple months away. So if we wanted to request some interim information, could do that. I'm not sure that we do paid advertising on social media. In fact, I don't think that we do. And so we wouldn't have funds, advertising funds to directly reroute to local media because we don't utilize, we put information on those sources, but we don't do paid advertising on those sources as it is. So what they're asking isn't really relevant to our local government. However, I think there's probably other ways that we could help and recognize the value of local media. And if you want to make any motion, you can, or could certainly think about it for a notice of motion for the end of this meeting. Okay.
Sure, thank you. I'll think on that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other pieces that councillors would like to speak to. We'll move on to report from in-camera. Just one item to formally note down on our report from in-camera section today, although it's already been released, is that regarding the SOMAS lands, council releases for public consumption that selection of a preferred development partner to enter into negotiations for a letter of intent for the SOMAS lands has occurred. At this point in time, just to add context to that, we do not have a firm agreement. Of course, we're working toward that in negotiations, and for that reason, we have not released who that preferred partner is. But we are releasing, of course, that we've reached that step because it was a public process that we went through to accept request for qualifiers for development partners. Moving on to council reports, are there any items that councillors would like to highlight? And then I'll go to Councillor Dane. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This isn't my written report, but I'd like to publicly recognize and congratulate the museum on their 50-year anniversary and take this opportunity to recognize and thank the staff and volunteers from the Historical Society for their many hours of hard work and for maintaining such a first-class attraction for our city. Congratulations.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Any other items councillors would like to highlight? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did not submit a report on this, but only because it's really just happened. I was fortunate enough to attend the World Rally Competition in Finland in Jyväskylä city. And as a part of that attendance, I was able to meet with members of their municipal council and the chair of their council, Jukka Hämäläinen. And I probably got that wrong. The chair of their council is essentially the elected representative similar to our mayor. What I wish to convey from that meeting was that we had a long discussion regarding homelessness and solutions to homelessness. And when I got back from Finland, I immediately received an email following up on that discussion. And I was able to provide a lot of useful information about our situation to our new friends in Finland. And I'm just pleased that we were able to have international rapport, and I hope that that will continue.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Okay, Councillor Dame.
Thank you. On July 1st, it was my privilege to celebrate with the Hupachesit Nation as they raised 2 new totem poles at the Loon Lake Campground in partnership with Mosaic Forest Management. And at the event, I was honored to accept a gift from the Hupachesit First Nation on behalf of the city of Port Alberni of this beautiful print right here. Thanks. It's very nice, yes. This print is a piece done by Hupachesit artist, and forgive me for the pronunciation, Klewatua, Rodney Sayers, the same artist who carved the poles. And I would just like to extend my deep gratitude for this gift and for the warm welcome the Hupachesit Nation extended to anyone who wished to witness this momentous event. And so I would like to move that council receive the artwork gifted to the city from the Hupachesit First Nation during the Loon Lake Campground totem pole raising and direct staff to display the artwork entitled Spirit Loon at City Hall with an accompanying plaque.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments? Okay, thank you so much for attending on our behalf and for bringing it forward to council today as well. Looking forward to having it displayed. And I think adding a plaque to it is a great opportunity to talk about the value of the artwork. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for Councillor Haggard with regards to the councillor report, if I may. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Haggard. I note with interest that you attended a UBCM roundtable on essentially public use of drugs within communities and what the solutions are. I'm wondering if the councillor could elaborate on what position the councillor took on behalf of the city and any more of the discussion that might be useful to other members of council.
I did not take any position on behalf of council because I did not have the authority to do so. It was more of a listening to what the other municipalities and their issues and what their concerns were.
Thank you. And I know there's a lot more discussion coming on this as the province is looking really to bring together, I think we have sessions on this coming up at UBCM, and the province is really looking to bring together more dialogue in order to support municipalities because this is a challenge that, so, provincial issue that has effect on municipalities and how we do our business. And so just looking for solutions. And I think the dialogue at UBCM around this will be really valuable to support. Okay, thank you for that. A follow-up question?
Yes. Yeah, I will be very interested in that. I was hoping that there'd be some information that we could have before we go into those meetings, but I look forward to those meetings. Also, Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Haggard, I note that in Councillor Haggard's report, there were two incidents reported where the councillor met with Madam Mayor specifically to discuss plans that they had for the city. I'm wondering if the councillor can elaborate on the content of those meetings.
When I meet with Madam Mayor, all I do is bring her up on the committee meetings, on the different committees that I sit on to keep her up to date on what these committees are doing.
The other thing that I would add to that is that Councillor Haggard has been the acting chair of the regional district for quite some time. Well, not anymore, but for quite a period of time. And so a lot of the discussions that we have are regarding regional district business and just making sure that everyone is up to date. So, yeah, thank you.
To
And
follow up,
everything that we've discussed is in my report.
okay, then I'm fully informed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to, would somebody like to move receipt of council reports?
Motion to receive, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Move on to new business. Item number 1, Argyle Street, road and streetscape design. And I apologize because I'm recusing myself from this and Councillor Douglas is actually the acting mayor. So rock, paper, scissors. I'm just gonna ask if council's okay, Councillor Solda, to chair for this item of our meeting. And I'm sorry, I'm recusing myself as a result of this being a very small section of land that we're talking about and my business being in that section.
All right. So this was a surprise. I didn't know she was leaving. So, okay. So we have a report that's dated August 3rd, 2023 from the Director of Development Services and Deputy CAO requesting endorsement from the Argyle Street upgrades. And who's going to give the report? Is that our, okay, go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as part of a long-term combined sewer separation projects that the city will be doing throughout the city, mostly in the south, there's a significant sanitary and storm sewer replacement work that's required on Argyle Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue in the near term. Now, although the majority of the work is underground infrastructure, in this portion of the project, given this is such a high-profile street, it is proposing some major changes to the road and streetscape, as has been previously done in the Kingsway and First Avenue along Argyle Street in 2008. Coors and Associate has prepared a technical memo that is attached to the staff report outlining a couple road design options for consideration of the road and streetscape upgrades. And this is kind of really important in order to undertake the detailed design, but also the city has received some major redevelopment proposals directly on Argyle Street and in the immediate area, and need to determine what that streetscape design is in order to allow some proper development planning for these potential projects. So Coors and Associates, and maybe if the Director of Corporate Services could bring up the two options on the technical memos. The first option by Coors and Associates essentially takes it from the two-lane vehicles, reducing it to one-lane vehicle in each direction, similar to what was done on the lower portion of Argyle. It has dedicated bike lanes, curb bump outs at the intersections, angled parking with sawtooth curbing, boulevard space, sidewalks, and incorporating of street trees, lighting, and other street improvements. The second option that Coors and Associates did is fairly similar, with the exception it's parallel parking option, which allows for 2 boulevard spaces, wider sidewalks, and again, street lighting, street trees, and other improvements. A third possible option is essentially a variant of option 1, that instead of a sawtooth curbing, it would just be a parallel curb alignment. This is similar to the work that was done in the lower portion of Argyle Street. It's a little less expensive and easier to maintain. The Coors and Associates memo did provide a brief analysis on the strength of weaknesses of the two options, but did not make a recommendation. Staff have reviewed these options as well as the third hybrid option, and staff are recommending option 2, the parallel parking with protected bike lanes. This option provides more sidewalk width for potential activation of this space, 2 boulevard areas for green space and street trees. It is the lowest cost option and most efficient from a maintenance perspective. Again, as stated before, the city does need to undertake this significant storm and sanitary replacement work on Argyle in the near future. And the decision on the road and streetscape design for this portion of Argyle will allow for the detailed engineering design to be completed in order to proceed with this construction, and also provide guidance for the planning of the nearby developments. Staff are recommending option 2, and I'd be pleased to try and answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Smith, I'm just wondering how this plan, option 2 particularly, would tie into the design of Lower Argyle, and would it provide a standardization or basis for further development on Upper Argyle? I'm just interested in the piecemeal approach and if we can do some standardization or not.
City planner.
I think as future works on the Upper Argyle were to occur, if that was part of the MAID's infrastructure plan, we would likely look to continue this. Again, that would potentially come forward to council for consideration. And in the long term, would we need to potentially look at some modifications to the lower part? Probably not huge modifications, but maybe looking to allow for the dedicated bike lanes to continue. But again, that would be something that we would have to look into more detail to provide council information. But so we know this 2-block section is something that we will need to do in the near future, and wanted to bring this to you for your consideration.
Councillor Patola.
Thank you. And when I'm looking at the drawing on page 254 of the package, this is for the second option, and it provides the gradient of the street being lower from existing ground, and there's a -5% and a +5% on it. Just wondering if, in layman's terms, does that mean the street will be flatter or than it currently is, and will that gradient tie into the existing gradient in Lower Argyle? So
I am not an engineer by training. This was done by our our engineering team, so they are looking at that. These are preliminary drawings. These are not the final as for construction drawings, but yes, they are looking at drainage. They are looking at connection between the two halves of the existing one to ensure that that will work, and that would be something that would need to be confirmed during the final construction drawings. Yeah.
You're good? Counselor? Yes, go ahead, Counselor Haggard.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Solda. I'm concerned because it is such a hill in that area, trying to parallel park, I think would be really difficult. That's my number one concern. And also, I usually don't get too concerned about losing some parking spaces, but losing 50% of the parking spaces on those blocks is quite a bit. And there is stores, retail stores starting to try and open. So I think that would be a concern of the merchants that are there. And also I would be concerned about that as well. Do you have any comments on both of those?
In regards to the parking on a steep hill, I would say angle parking and backing in and out on a steep hill also has challenge, and just like any responsible driver, you need to take due care given the conditions you are. So I again, not a traffic engineer, but I would say parallel parking on a steep hill is not any more hazardous than angle parking, trying to back in on angle or back out onto oncoming traffic on a steep hill, in my opinion. On the parking issue, certainly that's something, that's why there's options here for council to consider.
Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So appreciate all the work. Obviously, we're going to have to do it because of what's going on underneath the road. However, I am concerned with having between Kingsway and First looking a certain way, then the next two blocks looking different, and then you go past up Argyle and back to angle parking. So what I would like, I mean, aesthetically pleasing would be the same all the way up the street. Again, that's just my comments to council. Again, appreciate staff for what they've done and the engineering group for all the work that they've done. But I just think if I was standing at the bottom of Argyle and I looked up and I saw angle parking, and then you've narrowed the road and you've got a bike lane that's not there for the first two blocks, and parallel parking, then you went to the top of the third in Argyle, and everywhere up past that is traditionally angle parking as well. So that's just my feelings on it, that I would like to see a hybrid option, or at least the option of what we've got between Kingsway and First Avenue, and continue that up the street, if that's possible.
City Planner, any comments?
Again, we're looking at the future here, and cycling, this option provides the widest potential sidewalks to activate that space. Adds double the boulevard trees. I think we need to be considering bike paths in the future, and that might be modifying existing works as we go. But certainly that's why there's options on here for council, and that's why we brought this to council for your consideration. But there are operationally and long-term, this was what was supported by staff, but certainly council's direction is what we're wishing to consider.
You're good? Okay, Councillor Dane.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to express my support for the recommendation put forward by staff. I think that it's very much in line with the priorities that council has so far stated. Between the more space for the trees, wider walkways, sidewalks, bike lanes, all of these things align with what we've stated are our priorities for these areas. I think that we need to be careful not to, like, we can't do it all in one fell swoop. And as Mr. Smith has stated, we have to be looking to the future, and we have to be planning each section as we do it for where we want to be down the road. And I think that this better reflects what we've said, that where we want to end up. And of course, budget always being a consideration, this being the cheapest option is also great.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Director of Planning, you said that option 2 is a less expensive option. What is the difference in cost approximately between the two options? Do you know?
So it's general, but if you look in the technical memo by Coors and Associates, I think it's on 247 of your document, they estimate the capital cost between option 2 and option 1, that option 2 would be 8% less.
I'm sorry, how much?
8% less of what option 2, or of what option 1 would cost.
So questions from the public, you can ask later, but we're not doing questions, so please don't make comments. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Petula, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make the motion that City Council endorse option 2 as outlined in the Coors and Associates technical memo dated July 7th, 2023 for Argyle Street upgrades, 1st to 3rd Avenue, road design concept review in order to proceed with detailed design and guidance for adjacent development projects.
Sorry, seconder? Any more discussions? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Mealy.
Maybe just one question then through you to our Director of Development Services. So since we're talking about the future and so and you don't have to say it's your opinion or anything, but so later on, 10 years down the road, whatever, when we start moving up Argyle to do more work, would this be kind of the template then at that point, moving up? That might be a tough question, and I apologize for putting you in a bad spot, but I just want to understand the vision, because if we're gonna do it here, then we might as well just template it and do it all the way up to the top of the road, right?
CAO?
Through the chair, this is part of the funds that council gave us to update our design standards and also our transportation master plan. As we go through that, that'll dictate how a lot of different designs for streetscapes all around town. This would be a consideration. If this is passed today, it would feed into that, but we will have more detailed public engagement. However, on the arterial streets, it's been very clear to me through the time I've been here is that multimodal transportation is increasing, and that on these busier streets that we will want bike lanes. The safest in a downtown area with many distractions is a separated bike lane, and that's why we would hope that the public and council, when we finish the master plans for arterial roads, would have protected bike lanes in them, where a lot of places are going to that.
Councillor Mealy?
Yeah, just a follow-up, and I appreciate that. And I'm not even really concerned about the bike lane per se. They're going to go in, and that's okay. I mean, let's be honest. You're not going to see me ride up Argyle on a bike. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry, but there are people that are able to do so. So I totally understand that. What I'm really worried about is like from 3rd to 4th, if we're going to template a parallel parking situation, and where I am going to assume, without going out there, that we have more angle parking in front of the businesses out here, Shill Insurance, Capitol Theatre. If that's what we're going to do, I want to make sure we're doing it right all the way up, because again, we'll have angled parking and then 2 blocks of parallel parking. But I would suggest that this next block here, that the parallel parking wouldn't work, especially at times something's at Capitol Theatre or all these businesses are running. So I'm just trying to make sure that I have the vision set out, and I just want to see where this is going to go.
CAO?
Yeah, sure, yeah. We would need public input beyond this scope of this project before we set the design standards for the rest of the area. There are cities that do switch it up the streetscapes and parking formats. Whether or not this council and the public wants that, that is yet to be seen. But all I can say is we as staff would bring it up to the lights like this. There are some other safety considerations for when most accidents happen when vehicles back out. There are less with parallel parking. I don't know if statistics have changed since I was directly in that realm, but from previous discussions, parallel parking has worked. A lot of communities, even on steep hills, There's many communities across BC that don't have the road width that we do have here, so they have decided to go with parallel, but so it is possible on steep hills. But whether or not it's decided all the way up Argyle to stay with a parallel and have wider sidewalks, I can't comment on that indefinite.
Councillor Patilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to state the reason I support this option is, first of all, it is significantly cheaper, and I think that's an important savings to the taxpayers in Port Alberni. And also, I was able to go to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities conference in Toronto this year, and a lot of the seminars that were held by the city planners, pointing out how they were developing their city to be more user-friendly. And one of the greatest objectives was an increase in public space, which was often developed on the street front itself by making sidewalks wider, more accessible to individuals. And they found that there was, with the greater room for comfort, there was greater usage and actually an increase in attendance at businesses and an increase in the usage of the general facilities by the public. So it really, for me, the ultimate idea here is this significant increase in public space along the sidewalks, and that's why I would support the option.
Anybody else? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Amelia. I just find it's going to look really odd. You have Harbor-Key, that's parallel parking. The next block is parallel parking. Then you have, angle parking. Then you have parallel parking, then angle parking. It's just look really odd. So unless we have a plan and a timeline to change the whole street all the way down Argyle, down to the Harbor-Key, then I just really can't support this at this time. I just want it to be uniform and to look all the same. Because in option 2, there is bike lanes as well, which I think is really important. And the only differences that I can see between option 1 and option 2, unless you can give me more information, is one's angle parking and one's parallel parking, because there's still the bike lanes and the trees and everything else.
City planner.
There's a couple difference. The sidewalk is quite a bit wider on option 2 than option 1. And you have a double boulevard for a little more green space and street trees on option 2 over option 1. So those are the most substantial difference, and there is a cost saving. So those are the main differences. And the sidewalk, I'm trying to remember exactly the difference in width. Yeah, so it's more than a meter, almost 1.5 meters additional sidewalk width on option 2 than on option 1. So that's what creates a much larger public space potentially. And like I said, double the boulevards, even though they're a little smaller for extra street trees and landscaping. And then there is a cost savings. So those are the fundamental differences.
Councillor Haggard.
Yeah, do we have a long-term plan for all of Argyle Street then? I just don't want to piecemeal anything. We need to have a long-term plan to make it more uniform.
CEO.
Through the chair, that work is yet to be done. Again, for the reasons the Director of Planning pointed out, is for development in this area and also for the combined sewer for our design for applying for grants and other items. That's why this is here in front of you today. Otherwise, it would have waited with the rest of the streets and went through the master planning process and updated design guidelines. As talking about revamping the lower part of Argyle, there are some changes happening down there, but to get a bike lane in there, there would be some substantial changes no matter which option is decided on. So I'm not sure, I don't believe that infrastructure is out of date yet, so it would probably be some time before we change the streetscape on the lower part of Argyle.
Councillor Haggard, anything else? Go ahead, Councillor Patola.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, Madam Chair, is it really is, in my opinion, looking to the future. And certainly, Argyle Street is disjointed as it is right now. If someone starts at the top of Argyle, there's a lovely boulevard that runs down the middle with no parking. And then there's a 2-lane road with parallel parking on the side, and then there's a 2-lane road with angle parking, and then there's a 1-lane road with angle parking, and then we get down to Harbor Key where there's, well, really not much of a road at all. It's all just a parking lot. So yes, piecemeal, it looks terrible. But the way to change the piecemeal that looks terrible now is by having a plan and moving towards the future. One of the great benefits of the added public space and moving towards the future corresponds with other sentiments that have been expressed by this council, which is developing public restaurant space, patio space. We have to make room for that, and certainly the area of Lower Argyle is one that this council is looking to improve and develop and make more user-friendly and tourist-friendly and citizen-friendly by having restaurants and public amenities located there. So part of the way to do that is to start with the first step on these 2 blocks. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Dane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree. And to add to Councillor Petola's point, I think that I do agree with some of the concerns I've heard about, consistency and aesthetic and making sure there's adequate parking. I think in a perfect world, we would have all of the above, the wider sidewalk, the more trees, and the angled parking. But in this case, it's an either or situation. And so for me, if I'm choosing between angled parking and perfect consistency at Argyle, and having the functionality of that strip, having the wider, the public space, the wider sidewalk, more trees, creating this area that people will want to spend time in, I'm willing to forego the angled parking in order to see that happen. And I mean, we'll have to look, at future plans, whether or not that ends up feeling like the right functionality for Upper Argyle in the future. I don't think that's not what we're looking at this moment. That'll be a conversation for later. Right now, we're looking at that stretch that functionally, in my opinion, works better with more public space and more trees. So,
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. Just my last comment. I really want to support this, but I'm having a really difficult time without a long-term plan for the entire Argyle Street. So if staff would like to bring back a long-term plan, I'd love to support this. But until then, I'm just really struggling.
City Planner.
I guess one issue why we're looking at these 2 blocks is twofold. It is this underground infrastructure work is something we probably need to undertake in the near future, not 5 years from now, in the near future. And there is some substantial development applications that would really benefit from having a decision on the streetscape here in order to ensure that they're fitting in with what that future is going to look like. So that's the reasons why we're asking council to consider this at this stage prior to the long-term strategy. I know that's still difficult for you, but that's the reasons why we're asking that now, as opposed to once a long-term plan is set in stone. So.
Okay, Councillor Haggard, you're good? At the moment? Okay, so my 2 cents worth is I'm not excited about not having the parking. We've had issues about people, the merchants complaining, people are parking there 2 or 3 days and there's not enough parking for their customers. That's my concern on that. The other one is regarding trucks. So not just the restaurant, there's other stores that have big trucks that come. So how will that, if we went with Plan B, how do the big trucks, how do they park to unload supplies to the merchants that have ordered? And some come in big trucks. I mean, they're not gonna do parallel parking. How does that work? The other one is we do have some events down at the Harbor Key that we have issues regarding where do we park? We park on the side roads, yes, we do. And just like all other communities, like the West Coast, I had to park in somebody's yard almost to find a parking in the West Coast. But the whole thing is, how do we deal with that? The other thing too, I do really like the idea of, and I've been really big on the supporting infrastructure. If we're going to dig a hole, let's look around and let's fix up everything around it too, instead of going back and go, oops, let's go back and we got to redig because we got to do this now. And the public too have always commented too about, oh, why didn't we fix that in the first place when we dug the hole? Why are we digging this hole again? So that has been out there in the public. So I believe in let's get it all done at the same time. I agree with the view and that whole thing, like let's do it all the way up, uniform and that whole scenario. So I'm sort of like here and I'm sort of there, as you can gather, and where do I go with that? But I understand the urgency about our infrastructure, and if we keep sitting on it, the cost goes up, and then we're all over staff about why didn't we do it in the first place? Well, it's on our shoulders. So anyways, anybody else have any comments? I just wanted to share my 2 cents, my feelings, and that's where I am. I love both designs, but I do worry about the trucks, and I don't know if you can address that, and so I'll give it back to you, City Planner.
Well, my comments on the trucks is that the city should not be designing our city streets for private development to use as loading zones. And if they need to, if we make changes, they need to modify how their deliveries are being done. These are public streets, but we like, in my real opinion, like, we should not be designing our streets to ensure that private property can use them as loading zones. So I'm sorry, I feel pretty strongly about that, and that the businesses, if they need to make modifications in the size of vehicle that's making their deliveries or use other opportunities. So this is still safe traveling lanes designed by our engineers. So the traveling lanes and the parallel parking lanes are appropriate for this level of street. So.
Touche. But my only concern is on that too, is a lot of the trucks will just park right in the middle of the street, and so there's car behind them. So there's that too. I'm just, gotta come back, it's the final last word. So I'm gonna call the question, I think, oh, sorry, CEO.
Through the chair, I just want to bring, just to make sure you understand that on angled parking, trucks aren't supposed to block the angled parking either. They're supposed to be individual sites. So no matter which one's happening, unless it's a nighttime delivery, they shouldn't be blocking the parking stalls either on deliveries. Now, that may happen, but it's not supposed to. The truck should be staying out off of instead of blocking cars or not allowing cars in. So just, I wanted to make sure you had that in your mind as well.
Score for you. Okay, let's call the question. We have a motion on the floor. Let's read the motion back just to be clear where we're at, please. Thank you. You have a motion. You made the motion. Yeah. So can we have the motion read again, please? Sorry, I caught you on.
That City Council endorse option 2 as outlined in the Coors and Associates technical memo dated July 7th, 2023 for Argyle Street upgrades, 1st to 3rd Avenue, road design concept review in order to proceed with detailed design and guidance for adjacent development projects.
And we had a seconder. So all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And let's call the mayor in, please. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just clarify, I'm not voting against the motion. I just would like more of a detailed plan for all of Argyle Street, because I do like the streetscape, but I just want a master plan. Thank you.
And thank you to staff. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you. Item number 2, update from our Manager of Planning on Pacific Mayfair Estates.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So for consideration today, is actually an alternate review process for the development application received from Pacific Mayfair Estates for the property located just north of Bird Street, encompassing the area commonly known as the Bird Street Beaver Ponds, located approximately a kilometer east of the intersection of 10th Avenue and Bird. The properties are not completely civic addressed yet, so often you'll just hear me refer to them as the properties or by their legal address. But for consideration today, as I mentioned, is an alternate review process, which would see the application referred to committee of the whole and also set out some minimum requirements for public engagement. And we're just considering the review process today. Back in September 2021, I believe it was September 1st, the city received an application for an OCP amendment on these properties. And then the staff have continued speaking with the applicant and working with the applicant over the last 2 years, and they have now resubmitted an amended application with updated documents for review. Staff have not yet started their official formal review of those documents. And the issue is that our current review processes are not adequate for an application of this complexity. And so we're seeking support for that alternative process for the work leading up to first reading. That would clarify expectations for council staff and the public, ensure an adequate amount of opportunities for community feedback, and support that council decision making. And so the proposed process is different from our current development procedures bylaw. You can see that it has considerable more engagement with committee of the whole, and there's additional staff review. The main difference being that it is not being referred to the Advisory Planning Commission, but instead committee of the whole. And the intent is to create more opportunities for council and the staff and the applicant to discuss that application in public meetings. And the Local Government Act does require additional public engagement for an OCP amendment. And so this process sets out some of those minimum requirements, and the applicant would have to submit an engagement strategy to staff that would be reviewed by staff and committee of the whole before they undertake it. And so if council supports this, it would establish a transparent review process and create opportunities for those discussions between all parties at public meetings, allow the applicant to go ahead and start preparing their engagement strategy with the public, and then support staff in setting review timelines for this file, which will set out expectations for all parties. So council's options today are to endorse the proposed review process in the staff report from August 3rd for this OCP amendment file, or council does not support this proposed process and provide alternative direction to staff. Staff are recommending that council do endorse the proposed review process for the Pacific Mayfair Estates OCP amendment application. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I suggest that you ask the applicant to please hold an open house with rendered drawings and staff there to answer any questions? I want this, as we all know, this is a pretty hot topic in our community. So I would like for all those questions to be answered to the public before they actually will come to a committee of the whole, or as many as we can. So I feel if the applicant held an open house and they could answer those questions one-on-one with the public, it will be better for us and to go through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Amelia and then Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Appreciate the report today. And I support this. I am in support of a more robust process for this, so I do appreciate the work that's been done and the recommendations ahead. The one thing I will note is the APC. Was there any reason why we were not going to send it to the Advisory Planning Commission, or are we simply having them as part of the committee of the whole? Question.
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor. Essentially, as you mentioned, a really good point, this process is much more robust. And so we felt that having the additional committee of the whole meetings, because they are more rigorous and give you more opportunities to ask questions, that referring to APC would be sort of doubling up on the process. And referring to APC would add a significant more amount of time to the review process.
Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, it's not a question. It's just, I hope we take this committee of the whole to a bigger venue, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of members of the public. So this would be a great opportunity for us to hold it somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate all that's gone into kind of putting this together. I do think that a significantly more robust process is required for this. And I just want to note that when this came originally to the city, and I think important to note that an application has not even ever come before council on this. We know and we knew here that there was a massive amount of work to do before even council would have the opportunity to see the formal application, let alone vote on it. So no votes had happened, and the applicant chose to take out ads in the paper, basically saying that they were ready to sell lots. That put council in a very challenging position, and for that reason, I think that just the way that it was gone about last time, I think was dishonest on the applicant's part and very misleading to the community. It caused a significant stir of misinformation that was unnecessary. I think that we need to hold this applicant to a very high standard based on the way that they chose to conduct themselves last time around. So I think this is a great start. I think we need to leave space and room for additional meetings to be put in here and additional community meetings. And from my perspective, if we start to see the same type of approach that we saw last time around, I think we need to be prepared to bring this back to council and possibly change the process further. But I think it's hard enough in this environment, in today's world, to get accurate information out to the public, let alone when we have an applicant that starts to really intentionally mislead. I think it becomes a lot more challenging. So I'm very cautious of really, proceeding at all with this development as a result of how badly it went last time and the applicant's role in that. And there were public meetings held that they chose not to attend as well. So I'm cautiously moving forward. Haven't seen the new application yet, but I think this process is a great start. So thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make the motion that council endorse the proposed review process noted in the August 3rd, 2023 staff report for the official community plan amendment application, OCP 21-10, submitted by Pacific Mayfair Estates.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Patola, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And item number 3, we have Antidote Distillery Company, the manufacturer license lounge endorsement application. Come on forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So yes, Antidote Distilling Company has applied to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, also known as LCRB, to add a lounge endorsement to their manufacturer license. The Liquor Control and Licensing Act does require that these types of applications be brought forward to local governments for comment. Council is required to consider the location of the establishment, the proposed person capacity, and the proposed hours of service when providing a resolution. And the resolution should acknowledge the impact of noise to the surrounding area, the general impact on the community, and the views of local residences. So the subject establishment is Commercial Retail Unit number 103, located on the western side of the commercial building at 4721 Johnson Road, and that is at the intersection of Johnson Road and Adelaide Street. The applicant is proposing an indoor service area with a capacity of 110 persons, as well as an outdoor service area or patio with a capacity of 105 persons. However, the number of patrons and staff within the establishment at any given point, both indoor and outdoor areas combined, cannot exceed the total capacity of 110 persons. The proposed hours of service are from 12 p.m. to 11:45 p.m. Sundays through Fridays, and 11 a.m. to 11:45 p.m. on Saturdays. Staff anticipate that the general impact on the community will be positive, as it will support economic development, and given the establishment's location in a busy commercial area along Johnson Road, do not anticipate that it will greatly alter the existing noise levels in the area. Public notice of the application was advertised in the Alberni Valley News and was posted to the city's website and posting places, and the city received no responses. Staff are recommending today that council support Antidote Distilling Company's application to the LCRB to add a lounge endorsement to their manufacturer's license at Unit 103, 4721 Johnson Road. And I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you very much for that report. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Mealy, would you like to read this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni support the manufacturer license lounge endorsement application for Antidote Distilling Company operating at 103-4721 Johnston Road and endorse the comments and reasons for support as provided in the report from city staff dated August 4th, 2023.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no additional comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much. We'll move on to item number 4, Vancouver Island Economic Summit. And this is just an opportunity for councillors to put their names forward who would like to attend. I am not able to attend this year. I think we have had Councillor Solda express interest and availability. Councillor Haggard, yourself as well. Councillor Patola. I think our policy says 2, or does it just specifically say council's permission? I think maybe we typically send 2, not necessarily actually that is our policy. Mike?
Through the chair, I think it is decided that on what council decides. I don't believe there's a specific number.
Okay, thank you. And I know that it has been noted that council is, that there's lots of room in our training and travel budget still as a result of a lot of staying home instead of staying in hotels during trips and that type of thing. So I would certainly support the 3 councillors going if the rest of council supports. Okay, I will make a motion that council authorize Councillor Patola, Councillor Solda, and Councillor Haggard to participate in the annual Vancouver Island Economic Summit, the State of the Island, taking place October 25th and 26th, 2023 in Nanaimo, BC, with authorization to include reimbursement of expenses incurred as per the city travel policy number 3009-2. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame. Any comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And we'll move on to item number 5, which is the train station building envelope modifications. Who do we have speaking to this?
Through the chair, I'll be speaking on behalf as we have some vacations currently. So I'll keep it really short. As we move forward to lease out the train station, we as staff feel that if it was a restaurant or an establishment that needed to have proper venting, that we would have to modify the building envelope. It's went through the proper process. We have funds in the budget to do it. As the attached drawings show where the modifications will be made, and it's been through the proper committee process. So we're looking for council to give us permission to move on creating these changes.
Thank you very much. And I know we do have the Heritage Commission who would like to provide comments as well. We don't have a formal mechanism for that, but if any member of council would like to just make a motion that we allow the commission to speak. Moved by Councillor Patola. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Haggard. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. So if one of you would like to come up and just provide any input that you'd like to prior to council's discussion, that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the councillors for allowing us a few minutes to give you some background and some understanding of the Heritage Commission and the work that we put into this discussion. My name is Pam Craig, and I am a trustee for School District 70 Pacific Rim and chair of the Board of Education. And just a quick little background, I am also the great-granddaughter of a settler family, Charles Bishop family, to this community. And my grandchildren are 5th generation of this family born in this community. So as a trustee, that gives me a great passion for protecting our heritage, making sure that our youth and students in this community understand and know why we're here and how we got here as a very beautiful, viable community. Not only that, we have many newcomers to this community, and part of that is educating them as well as to those historical sites and positions in this community. So the train station also is listed in the National Registry of Historic Buildings in Ottawa and represents the growth of this country, the growth of British Columbia, and the growth and establishment of this community because of its heritage of transportation. First of all, of course, it was train transportation. In the 50s, it grew to freight truck transportation as well, bringing goods in and out of our community on a regular basis. So that building is right now on the outside exterior, a very beautiful historic building representing a station, a communication, and a transportation hub, which are very familiar to all Canadians across the country. So the recommendation that you are going to receive today is to allow for the change to the outside look of that building with the establishment of exhaust and ventilation for a commercial kitchen. And the Heritage Commission discussed this for a considerable length of time, that that would not be appropriate, that it would change the historical value of that building with a huge venting system put on the roof. And I believe the roof, and suggested to us at the time, was on the flat roofed area at the back of the building where the former freight trucks would come in to load and unload. So we want I'm here speaking for that commission to emphasize, to please consider what is going to happen to that building. Part of the issue around this is the actual physical location of the building. As you go down the hill, you see that roof, and it's off to the right as you enter the Harbor Quay. Also, there are numerous other businesses and residences in that area who will then be able to see that huge complex item that will be placed on the roof, and very odd, displeasing value to the actual vision of that building. So I urge councillors to take a second thought and think about that, and understand that that's going to change that building, in our view, as taking away its historical value. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike.
Through the chair, I also am notified that the architect, Mr. Wilking, is also online if council has any questions directly to the architect.
Thank you very much. Questions from council. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I am on the Heritage Commission on behalf of council. First of all, thank you to Trustee Craig and our chairperson, Madam Flostrand over there, who keeps us in pretty good order in a meeting. So we did have a very extensive discussion at the at the commission meeting. One thing that I did come up with, or at least an idea, is to, if it is on the flat roof, is to have 3 banner style signs in a triangle to cover that, where if you come up Argyle, if you come down Argyle, if you come up Kingsway, and it'll be a sign saying home of the Port Alberni's Heritage Building, something like that. So I do support what the commission members say. I think there may be a middle ground here to enable the city to still have that in certain areas, and to be able to hide it, to keep that the heritage building in the way it's supposed to be kept. Yeah, I can't say that what I see today is something that I'll fully support. And again, I'm just going back to the discussions we had at length with the commission, and I must agree with the commission that putting a big ventilation piece on top of the building is definitely going to change it. And again, and as Trustee Craig said, it's just also where the building is. It's not on a flat road. We're coming down. You can see that. So I think there's some things that we need to look into to appease both sides, but I think there is a way to do it. So.
Yeah, thanks so much for those comments, Councillor Mealy. And I would agree. I think that there is sort of a middle ground here personally. For me, I think one of the most important aspects of heritage is the ability for people to engage and interact with it. And right now, as our only heritage building designated in the community, I think that it is drastically underutilized in people actually having the opportunity to interact with that building. And I see heads nodding, so I know that, and I know that there was a long discussion about, from the commission, how do we make this work, not how do we stop this from working. So just want to thank the commission. We really appreciate that approach and perspective. I personally, I mean, we set out on this path to find a tenant and improve this building because I think we all really understand the importance of it and the value of it, and we recognize that the current condition of it a couple of years back when we started this process was not good. There were some major challenges, and the city needed to invest a pretty significant amount of money in fixing it up. That has been largely done now, and we know as well that we received a pretty large grant from the province to facilitate a lot of that work, so appreciate the province for contributing to the project. But really, at the end of the day, this project was about welcoming people into what I think we all agreed was one of our greatest assets as a city that unfortunately was sitting a lot of the time vacant and closed. So we want people to be able to come into the building. We want people to be able to interact with a pretty incredible asset that we do have and really just utilize it to add vibrancy to the area. So for me personally, I think that if venting has to go on a part of the building in order to get people in to be able to interact with that, I think that's a trade-off. And I support it. However, I do think that there's more that could be done, either to sheath that in a way that makes it look heritage, or maybe, like Councillor Mealy has suggested, something that is not heritage but speaks to the heritage. Maybe, and that's maybe better, so that it doesn't look historic and be wrong, but rather it is used, like, you know, something that is a banner or an art piece or something that is clearly not a part of the heritage, but rather speaks to it and draws attention to the building, which is largely correctly historic still. So I feel personally like we can, if council is supportive generally of moving forward with this, we can approve this today still and work on what that would look like. And if council wants more information before we get to that point, then I think that would be fine as well. Councillor Haggard.
I agree, Madam Mayor. This beautiful building has been empty for many, many, many years. It's not been used the way it should be intended to use. And we have an opportunity now to put a tenant in there, will draw people to the area, make it thriving, and make people enjoy going to a beautiful asset that this community has. So I think if we can work the architect to make it look less obvious, then I think that we can do that and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have the architect on the phone, or online. Maybe we could ask him, does he have any ideas that he never thought of?
Thank you to Madam Mayor and the other councillors. There's all kinds of options that we could do to shroud the fans that are up on top of the flat roof. Part of the reason that they work so well on flat roofs is because they have easy access to them, but you could put signs, you could put fences, you could cover it with a trellis. There's many things that you could do up on that rooftop. And I think the question then would be, what kinds of things would the city like to see there? Right now, of course, it's a flat roof that has a collection of gravel and moss, but since it's been redone, and so now we have a clean flat roof, and so it's a carte blanche. So we can do anything we like up there, and none of that equipment has any restrictions about, like, you know, how you can conceal it. It does have to get to the air, obviously, but other than that, there are a lot of options for us up there. And so in order to go further with this, I think one of the key things that I would suggest, and this is a suggestion to all of the council members, is that we proceed with the plan as is, knowing that there's additional concealment that's got to go in. And then once you can see it from the street, and as the Heritage Commission has mentioned, you see it as you come down Argyle Street. Once you're looking at it, then we can decide how much is required, and before we promise ourselves too much or too little in that respect.
Thank you for that. And I think just as a result of listening to you speak, I'm going to suggest, I have a suggested motion, and I'll just read it and then I'll allow more questions. So that council directs staff to proceed with exterior modifications to the train station as per the staff report dated August 3rd, 2023, and that council further direct staff to work with the Heritage Commission to bring back a recommendation on how to hide or conceal the view of the venting.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Moved and seconded.
Just to follow up regarding the, where was I going to go with this? I wouldn't want to see like flagging or anything like that because you know what? The wind destroys them. They start looking tacky. I want something more solid where it's not going to be, that's my wish, but you're going to be working with the Heritage Society and that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think for me, does the Heritage Commission and then us as a follow-up prefer to see that hidden and look historic or have it recognized? So if we send that back, then I think it will work well. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the word banner was just banner style. What I really am thinking is 12-foot pieces of wood in a triangle painted to say, you know, it could even be, even with the city logo on it, or coming up Argyle, it says Harbor Key this way, or coming up Kingsway, or coming up Argyle and it says City Center that way, or, but like I said, the best one would be home of Port Alberni's only heritage building. And then it would be oh, drop in. So, but yeah, definitely something more concrete and solid, Councillor Solda, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My first question is for Mr. King, and I'm not well, I am concerned about the vent on top of the flat roof, but I'm also concerned about the side vent beside the second story roof and the holes underneath the eaves for venting. So I'm just wondering what other options are available that, or are there any options available that would not disturb the exterior envelope of the heritage building?
So to be frank, there really aren't any options that would allow a fully ventilated building that meets the modern building codes without providing a hole in the wall that we can bring fresh air in and exhaust the stale air. There are options that allow some of the venting that's within the wooden frame building to be brought into the concrete building. In fact, that's what we're doing by bringing a rooftop unit that's in the concrete building on the flat roof. There still require ventilation, for instance, to the second floor, and ventilation for aspects of the call it the public space that's within the wood frame portion, the old train station, that needs to get to the outdoors. In this drawing, there's actually two options. So not all of the vents are required. There's a couple options. So we can put some here or put some there, and we'd be, asking for support from staff to help us determine which location is the most ideal. There are a few locations that piggyback on some of the existing openings that were above some of the older doors, and others that are borrowing similar language. Uh, the the louvers, which are the metal plates that go into the wall, that's what you'd see, are intended to be similar to the trim color and stylings that we have elsewhere on the building. So they're intended to fit up under the eaves in the way that some of the other trim features of the original building were. And so the intent is to hide them away as best we can, and to not puncture as much through the roof, because we find that actually causes several things when you can get a leaky roof. But it's obviously more obvious to the public when you have lots of fans coming through the roofs. So we're trying to limit that to as few as we can. And so in order to trade off from that, we're looking at louvers that are up in the eaves above the doors in places that you otherwise wouldn't see.
Thank you. So my next question would be to the Heritage Commission, and I have two questions that would just be for my education. The first is the second floor of this building, was that original or has that been added?
As it goes to that big peak in the middle, that was originally there. In the old days, it was actually accommodation for the station master at the time.
And as far as the heritage designation goes, is the cinder block truck bay, is that heritage as well, or does it have any sort of different designation than the wooden structure?
In our view, it's heritage. That was developed in the 1950s by CPR to get their freight in and out of the community. And it was attached to their building. So in our view as a commission, that's all one unit. It's all one space. I'm not positive as to what the National Registry might say, I don't have it here with me. But for our purposes, it's all one unit.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, and is everyone clear on the motion? Okay, wonderful. Then on the motion, which has been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Solda, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And thank you to the Heritage Commission for coming today as well. Okay, item number 6, home-based businesses and request by Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I asked for this to be put on the agenda as a result of extensive discussion informally by members of council, resulting from a inquiry made by Councillor Dame with regards to a home-based business that was having difficulty operating and decided to close down in Port Alberni because they had not been issued a business license. More correctly, as I understand, and I stand to be corrected further, they never applied for a business license. They were told they needed one, they made an inquiry about getting one, and then were told that they couldn't get one, and that was the end of the matter. The discussion then ensued around home-based businesses and if we should be supporting them or not. The decision by staff apparently was because that home-based business competed with a commercial business and didn't offended certain sections of our strategic plan. And I wanted to bring this forward, not because that situation was anyway improperly handled, but that future situations could be better handled. And I note that it's council's job to make policy, and it's the administration's job to enact that policy. The policy of council is clearly set out in the bylaw that says home occupations are a permitted use, subject to only Section 516 of the bylaw. And Section 516 sets out specific reasons that a use would not be permitted, none of which would apply to the specific business that was being referred to. So I understand that staff often has to interpret things, but it would be my suggestion that in this situation, they do not need to interpret things, that the bylaw we have is inclusory and not exclusionary. Therefore, all home businesses are allowed, subject only to the restrictions in Section 516. And that interpretation certainly corresponds with our strategic priorities 5.2, 5.2.1, 5.2.2, which speak to encouraging housing options and affordability of housing and different housing situations, I guess is a good word. So home occupation itself is not defined, and therefore it is inclusive of all businesses. The fact that a particular business is defined in commercial does not exclude it from home occupation. So without suggesting anybody has done anything wrong, I think what we have here is a problem of poor definition that is then requiring staff to enter a position that we as council should never be putting the staff in. Now, in my reading of the bylaw, it's quite clear, but apparently it's not clear enough. And I regret that the decision was made as it was, but certainly the discussion that ensued after that decision was by councillors saying that we wish to support home-based businesses, or those councillors that commented, as I say, it was informal, or that we also wish to support various economic means to empower citizens to be homeowners in our community, which is why I can only assume that some previous council, before I was ever around, made the bylaw the way they did to allow home-based businesses. So there it is. It's permitted. Certainly there are arguments and reasons to discuss whether it should be permitted, or to clarify how it's permitted. And I would leave that open to council to make some considerations. I thought it was particularly pertinent today, as we already discussed, that the zoning bylaw went forward, which further restricted those home-based businesses in a very particular manner, although I don't know how that came to be. It was a drafting by staff, but I don't know that staff was ever instructed by council to change our policy, which is clear that home-based businesses are allowed. So there's a miscommunication in a number of different directions here, and I think it would be very advantageous for the citizens of Port Alberni that we clarify that. So I don't have a motion to make, but I would think this should be something that would or should come up at Committee of the Whole. I bring it up here because this was the first opportunity, our previous meeting not happening. And I'd invite any other councillors to make comments or input to see what our collective opinion on this matter truly is.
Thank you for that. And I just want to suggest that I think we should forward this to either our next Committee of the Whole or our October Committee of the Whole. If there's room at our next one, I think we should forward it to our next one. I know that there's a greater conversation here that could be had around OCP and everything else, but I think sometimes we make things into a very large issue when really I think there's an intent here to simplify and enable home-based businesses, and it doesn't necessarily have to tie into years of planning, though there could be further changes as a result of some of the larger plans that we are making. What I heard when this issue came forward was a strong support expressed by, I think, everyone on council who took the time to comment on that issue, to look for ways to modernize the policy that we have if it needs to change. And I think you make some good points about how, I mean, maybe it needs to change just for clarity, but I think that the intent is there. But really recognizing the economic state of things and the cost of living increases and how that has changed over the last few years, and looking for ways to enable members of our community to generate income rather than being prohibitive or restrictive. So I would like to see us bring this forward to a Committee of the Whole very soon. I think another option is we could just ask staff for a report on recommendations of how to modernize and enable home-based businesses more effectively in our community. And maybe if we forward this to a Committee of the Whole, we could ask for a background report to be provided for that Committee of the Whole, obviously, so that we're not just all stating our opinions without any information. It'd be more effective if we have a report on options. But I would like to see this come forward soon, and I know that we could tie it into bigger reports, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be. Other comments? I've got Councillor Solda, and I don't think I have anyone else on the speakers list right now.
Madam Mayor, I would like to see it modernized, and I have no problem with staff coming back with the alternative and then have a discussion on it. It could be done at the Committee of the Whole. It could come back with the alternative from there.
So rather than continuing on in conversation, why don't I move that council direct staff to prepare a background report with options to modernize our home-based business bylaw and enable with an eye for enabling home-based businesses, and bring that to the next available Committee of the Whole where there's space on the agenda. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no additional comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And item number 7, council meeting leave policy. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I am going to speak from the podium on this matter, but
Do
only
you need to?
but only
Are we doing this
only
still?
for a specific reason. And I'm doing that not as a member of council, but as a taxpayer and a member of the population of Port Alberni.
We are going to write that out of our procedures bylaw if you keep doing this, Councillor Patola.
So, Madam Mayor, and you might not want to miss it again. So, Madam Mayor and members of council, I stand here not as a member of council, but as a member of the population of Port Alberni, the taxpayers, our bosses, the people that employ us. And I look at the people that are employed by us in the city, from our CAO right down to our casual workers. And I see what I consider an excellent work environment that provides for care and concern of the workers. And as an employer, that's important to me. And as an employer of the city council, that is also important to me. And so I see that our city council does not have an opportunity to take bereavement leave. Our city council does not have an opportunity to take vacation time. Our city council does not have an opportunity to financially support their families where there's a conflict with their obligations to city council. Those are problems that I think, as an employer, I would like to alleviate from our employees, the city council. So I have introduced a motion that's not fully set out here. I'm wondering, is it set out in the materials? Oh yeah, there we go, it's all there. So, and in speaking with some people, once I wrote this up, it could be definitely reworded or have better punctuation. And it could be changed so that the numbers that I have picked out of the air that I think are appropriate could be discussed and arrived at by consensus with the rest of the members of council. Currently, the community charter says that if you are absent for 60 days or more from a council meeting, that you are no longer eligible to be a councillor. The exceptions of that are for illness or with leave of council. Now, we have in the past discussed what a reasonable council we are, and I certainly think that exists at this point in time. We certainly probably didn't need to have a code of conduct for this council, but we've seen under different councils it might be required. So under different councils, I wouldn't want an individual to have their choice to represent the people who elected them have to be weighed against their need to attend to an ailing parent or a child that had an accident or even their own mental health by being able to take a vacation that happens to correspond with a city council meeting. And so this proposal is that, not that we will guarantee that, but it is that we have a policy that says in all those situations, council will grant approval, which is in accord with what the community charter requires, that we can grant the approval for that. I feel that by doing so, we will raise the quality of our employment scenario, and that the people of Port Alberni, our employers, will benefit because having a fair work environment attracts individuals to the job. An unfair work environment keeps people out. For example, currently, if permission was not given, an individual that wanted to run for council but was experiencing some kind of maternity issue, as in they were about to have a child or wanted to have a child within the next 4 years after being elected, would not be permitted to take maternity leave. That, to me, as an employer and a citizen, is abhorrent. Every individual across Canada is entitled to maternity leave. There's no reason a city councillor shouldn't. So, whilst my proposal may be overwhelming and may be poorly worded, I'm present it as is for the purposes of discussion, and I'm certainly open to input and thoughts from my fellow councillors on how we can make this job fair and attractive to all members of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions and comments from council. Councillor Haggart.
Well, I truly appreciate Councillor Bertolotta's wanting me to take so much paid time off. It's a great idea, but when you take on this job, you don't take it on to take time off, and you take it on because you're dedicated to the community. I think that in last term, I missed one meeting due to holidays. now we have the option to do Zoom in, which I have also done when I've been away. Last year, I had a very unexpected and extended surgery, and I Zoomed in while I was in bed. I mean, that's what you do. And when I planned holidays last year, I actually do look at my calendar to see when can I go on holidays. So, but there's nothing to say you can't go on a holiday. I don't see anything that you can't go on a holiday and miss a meeting or miss 2 meetings. I have 2 holidays planned coming up, and I probably will miss a council meeting. And I think that's okay. In 5 years, I deserve a holiday. And I think that's okay. I hope the taxpayers will do that because I do spend a lot of time during the week, not just at council meetings, dedicated to this community. So I feel that it's okay if I miss 1 meeting a year because I'm on a holiday. However, the one thing I will support in what you've presented is development of a parental leave policy. I think that's very important, and not just maternity, but males do have leave as well if they have a child. So I will support that, but the rest of it I will not. I can see lots of issues with everybody takes 6 weeks paid time off, then for a holiday, we're going to have problems with quorum and who goes first, who goes second, who can't be there. Well, I want to go, but we don't have seniority, so who gets chosen to go? So I just can't support that if there's too many issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Interesting. We had a counselor who ended up being in the hospital, couldn't come to council meetings, and we extended their leave through voting. And he could not come to a meeting. And missing meetings, I have missed meetings because I had a shoulder replacement just recently. But I tried to do Zooms. It's really hard to do Zooms going across the ferry to see the surgeon, and the ferry knocks off. Holidays, for about 8 years, when I was because I have been on council for a number of years, I didn't do a holiday because this is where I wanted to be, and this is why I got elected. It's a choice. If I decided to go on a holiday for 2 or 3 weeks, then I would make sure council knows. I'd try to time it with meetings, and there might be the odd meeting, yes, I would miss, and council would be fine with that. So we've never really had any issues on that I'm aware of. If somebody wants a holiday, they take us time. I would love a 6-week holiday. I can't do that. And 2 weeks is a limit. I definitely would support maternity leave, but that would mean maternity leave legally is what, a year? And how do we work that? You know, my kids were really little when I started coming on council, and when I was elected as a councillor. We just made do. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Patola for bringing this all forward. I feel that there's a lot in here that has been affected myself over the years. I missed 1 council meeting in my first 9 years as a councillor because I was volunteering at a Bulldogs game, playoff game. So other than that, I always wanted to make it. December 23rd, 2005, my mother's mother, my grandmother, passed away. I was the acting mayor, and everybody had gone already for Christmas break. The duty that I have as the acting mayor is to be available in the time of emergency. So on December 27th, of 2005, I didn't tell anybody, but I went to Vancouver first thing in the morning, met up with my family, had the funeral, and drove right back just in case there was a tsunami or something. And that's the duty of a counselor, unfortunately. Would I have loved more time that day? Absolutely. Would I have loved like 2 days, 3 days around Christmas to be with my family? Absolutely. But those are the duties back then, especially that I was told those were very important by previous mayors and administrators. So those are the things that I did over the years. I would love to, and in fact, I would guarantee that because of my time on council, I only take 1 week vacation every year for my other job because I just don't see how I can take the rest of the time off and leave and do all the other things. So it has kind of molded my life almost in a way to this point. So in saying that, and I will say publicly, it would take an absolute lot for me to vote against a counselor in their position merely because they were elected by the community. And even like right now, if we had a counselor that we decided to expel from council because of attendance, that would be a cost to the community for an election. If it was within the last year, we can do it as a 6-person council. I totally understand that. But it would take a lot for me to vote against somebody here for not making meetings. It would have to be extraordinary for me to agree to kick a counselor out. So, so a lot of the stuff, and I appreciate Councillor Patola bringing this all forward, and I totally agree. Maybe of bereavement leave and definitely for maternity, paternity leave. Totally agree that, but I would also suggest at that point that if a counselor went on that leave and told us ahead of time, that I would be fully supportive and we work around it. And it goes back to our being a reasonable council. Of course, there are councils around the province that aren't reasonable. I'm very proud to be part of this council, and it feels just like the previous 3 terms as well, where we can get along, we can understand. Councillor Douglas is not here. It's a personal reason for him. I don't need to know. Councillor Douglas has his personal reasons for not being here today, and that's totally fine. And we'll see him next meeting. It's okay. It's just part of the process, part of the life that we have chosen as well. But definitely when it comes to bereavement leave and maternity leave, paternity leave, I would support it, but I would support that anyways at this point if something happened for anybody. But I do appreciate the work Councillor Patola has put in. I really do, because there's definitely been some things that I see on here that I have had to deal with personally in my personal past life. So I do appreciate the consideration.
Thank you. I think I'll just add to the conversation that I think there are parts of this that I definitely support, that we standardize, and definitely hearing, council say, I would support. I think we all would support anybody who had a reasonable reason for needing to take leave, because we are a reasonable council. Our last council would have done the same. I know many councils before would have continued to do the same. However, we do look around the province and see examples of councils that behave very differently. So I do think actually that there are pieces in here that maybe there's some amendments that are needed, but I think it is important to add a policy that that isn't just council can grant, but council will grant in these situations leave. And I think that it will likely not be used by this council, and maybe it won't be used by the next council. But I had 2 babies while I was on council and adopted 1 child, and I don't think I missed any meetings partly because I felt like I couldn't. And so I think that's an important, I also wanted to be there. I phoned into a couple. I didn't want to lose my vote, but I also was young and on council for the first time and felt like I didn't want to have to ask my council. I didn't want to have to get permission. I didn't want to be criticized by the community. So I actually think that what is being brought forward by Councillor Patola to guarantee that if you have these situations, you can take leave if you choose to, and that nobody can tell you can't, is actually really important. So I'm hearing a lot of consensus around maternity, paternity, bereavement, and maybe we need to look closer at what that specific policy looks like. It might not be perfect what's written in there right now, but I do think it's incredibly important that we, that especially as we, approach next election, that if a younger person wants to run who might want to have a baby in the next 4 years, because 4 years is a really long time to commit to being on council, that they know that they're going to be able to take the time to do that they need to, and that it's not going to be questioned. So I'm not sure specifically, and maybe I'll just throw it back to you, Councillor Patola, if you have any thoughts on how you'd like to move forward, but I think there's some really important pieces in here for us to approve.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to all the members of council for their comments and the support, at least of the concept, irrespective of whether or not vacation should be included or whether or not any individual would choose to take that leave. My purpose was, as you pointed out, Madam Mayor, to allow an individual the choice or the option. I would make a motion that this matter goes to the Committee of the Whole for further discussion by council and any recommendations that might be provided by staff as to the form and content and subject matter of a policy regarding assured leave.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy, and comment from Councillor Solda.
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm sure you've done some homework on other communities. Do they have this? And I look at, we never used to have a code of conduct, and we found out we needed one. So again, this could happen, as you alluded to, for the future. So let's sit down, let's talk about it. I also agree it could be tweaked. If you want holidays, 6 weeks is a little extreme for me, but that was, when I saw that went 6 weeks, oh my God. So, yeah. So anyways, I have no problem having that discussion. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, yes, to respond to Councillor Solda. No, I have not reviewed other jurisdictions and whether they have similar policies. But I can say that the enabling legislation is permissive. And I think as municipalities in general, we stick ourselves in a corner and say, this is the only thing that the province wants us to do, instead of standing up and saying, these are things we are able to do, taking the bull by the horns, as it were, and leading. So this, in my opinion, is a matter that is appropriate. And thank you to all the rest of council for thinking that this is a matter that at least deserves some discussion. I think in a committee of the whole, we'll find out whether or not the public thinks this is a matter that deserves some discussion. And I do not see any problem at all with being the first community to lead the way in a progressive manner to create a work environment that encourages more involvement in the democratic process.
Thank you. And we've got the motion to take this to a committee of the whole moved and seconded. Not seeing any further comments. We have one further comment.
Just really quickly, just for reference, and I just decided, because City of Vancouver is the biggest community, well, one of the biggest, just went bereavement leave council members, and they actually have a list. It says request for leaves of absence, council motion members, that council so-and-so be granted leave of absence for December 9th, 6 p.m. onwards and all that. So it looks like other communities do have that already. So there's a little background.
Great, thank you. Okay, then on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Great, and moving on to item number 8, which is a notice of motion, council procedures bylaw amendment from Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will sit here and discuss this matter. So I wrote this motion as a result of a council or a committee of the whole meeting during the summer being canceled. And I noted that some individuals in the public were displeased by that. And it made my legal mind start wondering that how that could come to pass. And I found that, end of story, it could not come to pass, even though it did. One would presume that a meeting is canceled when there is nothing on the agenda. And although there was very little on the agenda for that meeting, there was one item on the agenda that could not be removed. And that is the public input period that we have so intelligently placed on committee of the whole meetings alone. So by canceling that meeting, I will say inadvertently, council has denied the ability for the public to have input onto council, which we so vehemently promised. That's a mistake, and I think all that can be done is learn from it. And so in attempting to learn from it, I tried to find the actual procedure for canceling a meeting. And unfortunately, none exists. So instead of pointing fingers, I think the solution is to create the appropriate rule so that that problem will not be encountered in the future, and there's a proper procedure for canceling meetings. A little bit further background is that the council's procedure bylaw is silent on the issue of canceling a meeting, although it speaks to the legal requirement under the community charter to have a schedule of meetings. So we're required to, by law, to have meetings, but we're not given any ability to not have meetings, cancel them, postpone them, or otherwise. Where the bylaw procedure is silent, it says Robert's Rules of Order should take over. And strangely enough, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, are silent on the issue of canceling a meeting. The general consensus in the world of the internet is that there is in fact no authority to cancel meetings, and that if there's nothing on the agenda, the meeting must be called and then adjourned. So we can correct that by correcting or by adding sections to our council procedures. Interestingly enough, and this is not a comment, Madam Mayor, on you individually, but there's probably a presumed authority in the mayor's chair to cancel a meeting, which I also found did not exist. The agenda is set by the corporate officer, and only the corporate officer. So that is a power that's delegated from council to the corporate officer. It's not appropriate for the corporate officer to delegate that authority back again. So should the corporate officer say, well, I just asked council and they said cancel the meeting, it becomes a circular argument. In any event, I have attempted in my rambling and imperfect, I'm not a lawyer way, to draft some amendments to the council procedure bylaw that would allow meetings to be canceled through a proper procedure. Without reading through my proposal, I hope council has already seen it, and this will allow the corporate officer to cancel the meetings. There you go.
Thank
Comments?
you. Can I just clarify, are you intending to make a motion today to endorse this? Or, I know this is a notice of motion, but you've spoken to it now, which is fine. And so would you like to ask council to approve this? Would you like to ask council to direct staff to bring a report forward, with this as background to make recommendations? Or what is your hope today for this information?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Therein lies yet another item that should be clarified. As I read the procedure, a notice of motion is made verbally during a meeting, whilst a motion can be presented in writing to be included on the agenda. And once it's included, it is a motion. It's not a notice of motion. Just as any report from staff comes forward with a proposed motion and council can make the motion or not make the motion, this would fall into that same category. Now,
And I would just further clarify, sorry, that you haven't made, I know that you do have
I
it
know
written in your
I've
report, but
spoken at
spoken
length.
to it and nobody seconded
And,
it.
well, I haven't even made the motion. So
It's written in your report, so.
You're correct. So I think, as with anything, the best place for new ideas to be presented are in a committee of the whole. I would actually ask that this be referred to a committee of the whole for further discussion by council and comments by staff. And at that point, we can either ask for reports or ask for drafting or whatever we do in committee of the whole, and have some input from the public as well.
Thank you. And so if that is a motion to refer this to committee of the whole meeting, I would just ask that maybe we actually ask for a formal report with background from staff so that we can have a more productive conversation about it at committee of the whole, if that's acceptable to you.
I would agree. Certainly legal input by minds that are trained in this matter would be useful.
Great. Is there a seconder to refer it? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments? Councillor Solda.
Just one thing, I just want to add, when the meeting was canceled, I was happy because I had the night off, but I also recognize that, man, we could have still had an open topic committee of the whole where the public, if they had something they wanted to bring up, which there would have probably have been, let's have that meeting. So that was my only take on that meeting being canceled, but recognizing we put an extra committee of the whole meeting on.
Yeah. For sure. Thank you. So I think there's been some great points made here. Largely, I think this is an oversight as a result of the change in our procedures bylaw, so an opportunity to learn from it. Let's bring it forward and discuss it, see how we can improve it going forward. Not seeing any more comments. Motion is moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. None opposed. Thank you. And notice of motion. So this one, I think, Councillor Patola, you wanted to possibly read on behalf of Councillor Douglas, or I know we may want to just wait for Councillor Douglas to be back on this one as well so that we could have a bigger conversation, but your choice.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I am going to not move, but put on my hat of Councillor Douglas because he's asked me in his absence to read this motion. So I will read it and make the motion, and then council can deal with it as it will. The motion is that council directs staff to salvage and reclaim materials from the SOMAS lands and other city projects which could prove suitable for pier improvements at Canal Beach, as well as other relevant city projects. And further, that council directs staff to collaborate with Seychelles First Nation, recognizing the importance of this historic area to develop a comprehensive plan meeting both governments' needs.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dane.
A point of order, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
If I may. So I'm a little confused here now because these are listed as notice of motions, not just this one, the prior one as well. We have the reference material. It should go to the next meeting unless directed to the committee of the whole. I'm not comfortable in making a motion on this, and especially considering the person who's making the motion is not here. I think other than sending it to committee of the whole or just, sorry, and maybe, like I said, I'm just a little confused because here it is as a notice of motion. It's written here. It should just automatically go without discussion to the next council meeting. Am I wrong in saying that?
Yeah, so I'd like to clarify, because I think this has really gotten confused in our past practice of how we have handled this, just as a result of a lot of staff changes over the last couple of years. But in my 10 years on council, what we have done is somebody has verbalized a motion that is not written on the agenda during new business. That is a notice of motion that goes to the next meeting of council. It's written on the agenda. If somebody takes the time to submit a motion that they would like written on the agenda prior to the agenda cutoff, and it ends up written on the agenda, we've got background information, then that is a motion that is intended to be read at that. The confusing factor here is that we're now calling those notices of motion, even though they're coming in with enough time for council to see it, know that it's coming, and then make a decision on it. Now, not to say that we have to make a decision on it, because just because somebody puts a motion on the agenda, so I would accept this as a motion because council's had time to see it. It didn't come out of thin air. It's not, that said, we can still defer this to our next council meeting. I think this would be better handled with Councillor Douglas in the room to speak to. I think we could give him that opportunity as well. Or we could ask for further information. But I think we do need to clarify our process because it has shifted, just largely as a result of staff and a newer council as well. But typically, if you meet the deadline, it's written on the agenda. That is a motion if someone chooses to read it as a motion. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think that's just what it is. It's listed as a notice of motion. So when I saw these two, all I took it as there's a notice, and I go back to the previous one is notice of motion. The motion is and with respect to Councillor Patola, I'd love to listen to you speak on the whole thing and read the whole thing out. However, you gave me the reference material. That's good. I see notice of motion. That'll be dealt with in another meeting, not here. And that's my confusion. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so clarification of that process. And we can shift that if we'd like. But from my perspective, a notice of motion is something that comes up at a meeting that nobody has time prepared to think about it, have their background, maybe go out and drive to different properties if it's pertaining to something specific. A motion is written on the agenda ahead of time. We all get it in time. And the challenge is if right now it's being written as notice of motion, we may not take the time then to go out and do that because we're thinking it's being dealt with in the future. So thank you. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Patola.
Motion to defer this until Councillor is back.
Thank you. Motion to defer until Councillor Douglas is back. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Councillor Patola, did you have a comment?
No, I had the remainder of what Councillor Douglas asked me to read, so I could discharge my duty. But with a motion to defer, that's not necessary, and there's motion to defer.
Okay, wonderful. Then on the motion to defer, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And council, I know we don't have an additional item written here, and I did just speak to things not coming out of thin air. However, I think this one is simple enough. I would like to just publicly recognize, I think it's Jolynn Watts from Sachot for obtaining a gold and bronze medal at the Special Olympics recently. I think this is something our community should be really proud of, and I would like to just move that council send a letter of congratulations. Thank you. So moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we will move on to question period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council on decisions or recommendations made during the course of the meeting. A maximum of 3 questions will be permitted per speaker.
3 people?
No,
3 questions?
3 questions. Come on forward. And if you wanted to start by introducing your name, please. And if you could just turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Excuse. I don't know if yeah, my voice sort of carries. Yeah. I've lived in this community since 2017. I moved here. It's nice and quiet, very respectful. And but the thing is, there with this, the issue is it's always being brought up, the waste of money. And I've read it in the newspaper and this and that about doing this. What did that do for people, the citizens of Port Alberni? Was it voted on? Did you guys make your decision there amongst yourself, or did you ask questions from the people there that live here? You know, like this crosswalk out here and the surveillance there. With this new road there that you're planning on doing with the parking and everything, the design you have there, are you planning on putting a rainbow crosswalk all the way down to match this one out here? Has anyone gone and watched The Sound of Freedom? You know, grooming our children, CRT in the school, with inappropriate material in the schools, libraries for the kids. If you guys watch the news.
Sorry, I do just have to ask that you try to stick to topics of relevance to this meeting and to City Council, and that you ask a question, please.
Okay, what I read regarding a new sports complex. I went down to the complex there this morning. It wasn't open. I've been there numerous times. They don't have enough staff. They got to shut it because they don't have staff members there to look after the place. You want to put a proposal out there to build a new sports center when you can't even staff the ones we have here? People aren't going to it. There's nothing wrong with this one here. That'd be a waste of money. Same as the parking, right? Same as the road work and the way it's designed. Number 1, and number 2, wide streets, trees and all that. You're gonna affect the people that have businesses down here. You're taking away a lot of parking for their businesses. And what I heard there, well, the people there that have deliveries, well, that's up to them there to figure out how to get their deliveries. It's not up to us there to look after them. Well, it is part and parcel to the committee to make sure that the businesses are looked after and they can carry on with their business and their work, you know. Also about the fires there that's been set around here. How come there isn't anyone there out patrolling? You know, like we look after the homeless, certain kinds of people there. Why don't you support families and their children instead of supporting all these different individual groups. Taxpayers around here are paying for your guys' wages and everything else like that. I suppose that's how it works, right? Or do you answer to a different agenda? World Economic Forum? Or what? Agenda 21, Agenda 30? You know, I've got a lot of education behind me, and I realize what's going on around here. It's all about control. Has any of these arsonists been picked up or arrested? Anyone been charged for these fires? You know?
Thank you for the questions.
All right.
So I do know that there has been some patrolling going on, and that our fire department does actively go out and look for opportunities proactively, not simply in response, but looking for opportunities to educate, put out any fires where needed prior to. And I'm not familiar specifically with the agendas that you are speaking to, but just to say that none of that is relevant to this local government.
Yeah, look up Agenda 21, Agenda 30. How about Georgia Guidestones, why they were demolished? You know, a lot of people don't do any research there. They just turn around and follow and hold onto the rope because it was good for this person and their family there. Well, it's good for us. Well, it's not good for everybody. Everything that's going on, they say they do a poll. Oh, the polls favor this group. The polls favor that group. The polls can always be changed to suit what the agenda is out. I'm out of here. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. Do we have other speakers today? Earl, come on forward. Or sorry, Neil, come on forward.
I had a number of questions, but I've erased them all because of the last discussions. The first one was the UBCM is happening at the end of next month, I understand, from Councillor Solder. And two questions. Is there any plans of this city councils and their delegates bringing up seniors' issues at any point in that convention? That may include meeting with the authorities on seniors' issues, or is there any resolutions being sent in? I remember requesting that we do that a couple of years ago, and you chose not to do it because you thought one was already going in. Seniors' issues are important to a lot of our constituents here in Port Alberni. So those two items under the UBCM. That's one question.
Thank you. I believe that we have requested meeting with Minister of Housing. And so housing for seniors is a piece of that. I don't have the list in front of me, so I can't speak to if there's any other meetings that we've requested that will highlight seniors' issues. But I think that the issues you've brought to us in the past have been around incomes and that type of thing. And I would say no, not at UBCM. Because those are more federal. However, if there's opportunities that you see of specific things we could be advocating for, then you're certainly welcome to bring those forward for us.
So, and no resolutions on behalf of seniors going in?
I don't think we have I'm trying to remember if we have a resolution in, because resolutions go in.
Not from this, and there may be from other
Oh, sure.
designations.
So I have not seen the resolutions package yet. Sorry,
Yeah,
Councillor
and I
Patola.
guess,
Sorry, Neil, I just have a comment from Councillor Patola.
Yeah.
I just add, thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have the list. We're also meeting with the Ministers of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. Those are definitely seniors' issues. Health is definitely seniors' issues. Housing, jobs, economic development, and innovation would be with respect to services to provide to seniors. Mental health and addictions is certainly a strong issue with seniors' involvement. Public safety and the Solicitor General, transportation and infrastructure, as well. Those are all issues that would be addressed by seniors as well as other groups.
So there's issues there that we can take part in. Yeah, and I'm encouraging us to do that. On the one issue of old age pensions, which is an important one to me, is I know that you can't change that, but it has to start somewhere. And that was my feelings a few times, that if it can go to the UBCM, that goes to the provincial and federal government. It has more clout, and I think we should be taking those avenues. Anyway, that's my number one. It's getting... I've got a little confused on the committee of a whole. Could someone explain to me why, again, just for clarification, I know what I believe I heard, but that doesn't always make it correct, is why, just specifically, why was it canceled, other than the fact that there was nothing on the agenda? It's not up to...
Thank you for the question.
Okay.
So it was canceled because there was nothing on the agenda, and that has been standard practice with meetings generally. So you will know over the years, Neil, that many committee of the whole meetings have been canceled if there's not been a specific topic on the agenda.
No, I didn't.
That said, no, yes, there has been many. I think more than 10 I can think of that have been canceled because there's been nothing on the agenda. So it's been very common. However, I think Councillor Patola and members of the public brought forward a great point that now that is the opportunity for public input, we should change that process. And so I think there's a push to change that process. There's support for it, and I would say issue address and recognized.
Okay.
So yeah, but it has been standard practice that if there's not been something on the agenda, it has been canceled.
I'm not familiar with too many. I can't say that there's none, and I'm not saying that. But since we've had committee of the wholes that's been canceled, I don't understand why. Maybe you can clarify it for me. Why? No reason why the committee of the whole under the new laws and rules that we have is for the public to give input. They don't have to write an agenda, but it's their meeting.
Thank
so
you.
why, if
so
the,
Neil, I
so if
hear
the
your
council
question.
doesn't
Neil,
make that,
I have to ask you to please not interrupt me. Neil, I'm trying to give you an answer. You're asking a repetitive question that I have answered. I appreciate you bringing it forward. Appreciate members of the public that brought that forward. And as has been stated here already today, we recognize that oversight. We are going to change that process. So it is not valuable to continue to rehash it going forward in this meeting. We can take additional questions from you on different topics, but we've provided information on that one. We've had a discussion at council, and there is certainly support and understanding that that meeting shouldn't have been canceled and that it won't be going forward.
and if I may, you had a meeting with council. Now it's public's chance to revisit that. And if you're going to make that change, I'm happy to hear that. I still don't understand why it's a public meeting for the public. You don't need an agenda. Okay, my last one. On the September 14th meeting, that's a replacement, I understand, for the one that was missed. It's been on the agenda for a long time. If you go back into the list, I can stand corrected, but it's easy enough to check right now. But I believe that meeting was scheduled at the same time this one was canceled. It's not a replacement. There never was a replacement. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's easy to pull that up right now.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. That's a Thursday, correct? Yeah, that was not on the schedule. So what staff did, I'm pretty certain, I don't want to speak on behalf of staff, is as soon as the one meeting got canceled, they decided to put the other one on and change it online. So,
Well,
but I say that with respect, Mr. Anderson, is that all the committee of the whole meetings are Mondays, because I don't have Thursdays off, right? So I understand my schedule, so I can guarantee you Thursday, September 14th was not on the schedule.
And all I'm saying is when it was canceled, I checked the future meetings, you press it, and pretty sure it referred to September 14th as a subsequent meeting to the one that was canceled. Bringing the point up, I'm not going to delay the conversation, but I'm not impressed by what I heard about the committee about those two items. The three items, the fact that we're not making any moves towards seniors. The opportunities will be there. I'm glad to hear that. It's my concern is, will we take advantage of them? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak to it today? Joseph.
Hi, my name is Joseph Laskosic. I live here in Port Alberni. And just a couple questions, and I'm going to repeat something that Neil's just mentioned too, but in a different, kind of different framework than that. First question I have is just in the meeting today, there was a vote taken regarding the streetscape on Argyle, and it passed. I believe that was the vote. Now, I was looking at the votes when it was voted, and you said adopted, passed. When I was looking, I didn't see. What I saw was 2 for and 3 against. That's what I saw. So am I incorrect in that? So the 2, I think, that voted for were Dustin? No? And am I allowed
Councillor
to say
Solda, do you want
that?
to speak to that?
There was 3 people that voted in favor and 2 voted against.
There was 3 for?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, I didn't
Okay.
see the 3. I saw, because I saw 3 hands come up when it was those that are against. And I thought 3 hands, but thank you. Just to clarify, because I thought that was weird, I see 2 and 3. How does that work?
Yeah.
Good, thank you for the
No idea.
clarification. I didn't want to go home and think that's a weird way of voting. And sometimes in the hurry of things, it can happen. So just to bring it up and to clarify, I thought it was worth doing. The second one was the cancellation of the committee of the whole meeting. So I have a question on that too. Why it was canceled, that we've sort of heard that, but on the day of the meeting, I went online, it was after 5, so I wanted to look up the agenda for the meeting after 5, so I can't phone city to say, is it indeed canceled? It looks like it's canceled. So I text 2 of the council members to find out, to verify. I got a response from one of them. The response I got was, that the delegation that was going to present, there was a delegation apparently that was in place, or somebody that didn't have their material ready, so therefore we've canceled the meeting. And that was like, okay, now you have to be a delegation to say anything. So that didn't sound too great. So my question is, prior to the last meeting, when there was a change to the bylaws regarding council meetings, I brought it up. Please don't get rid of the question period during council. It's an opportunity, it's consistent, it's there all the time. We can do that. Committee of the whole, so far, and this is a quick, it's just in the stages of developing, so it's a little premature, but from what we have as, what do you call that, evidencing whether it works or not, so far is not great. So last meeting I brought up to council, I said, how do you think it's working so far? And that's premature because it just changed. And I got the answers I expected. That didn't. And I said, so how do you think that makes us feel as the public coming to a council meeting? Do you think we even want to come to them if we don't have that opportunity? So again, I bring it up. And because I think it was said, this can be changed. We're voting on something, we're going to see how it works. So far, not working. So my question is, would you revisit it at this point and bring back in a stable, council meetings happen, they're not canceled, committee of the whole is a great idea. But would you revisit, and again, premature, but based on the track work or the track that we've seen so far, I think it's worth bringing up and saying, would you revisit that?
Thank
And
you,
to
Joseph.
reintroduce question period at the beginning of council meetings.
And we have question period at the end of council meetings still.
Question or questions, yes, but public input is what I meant.
Thank you for
Public input.
clarifying.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so I'll let other councillors speak if they'd like to provide input as well. My personal feeling is I wouldn't agree with your statement that it's not working. I think that the intent of shifting council meetings and the structure was to make council meetings focused on the business of council and less about public input. That said, I think we identified an issue here today. We also talked, amongst ourselves about the process of how do we notify the public if a meeting is canceled, because that may not be a committee of the whole meeting. It might be a council meeting for different circumstances. It might be a public hearing. There's a lot of different types of meetings, even a committee meeting that is open to the public, whether people regularly attend them or not. There are a lot of different council meetings that could be canceled, and if that happens, then we need to have a structure in place to make sure the public is notified in a way that doesn't require you to text a councillor, but so nice that a councillor got back to you, and so nice that we're all so accessible that you can text 2 councillors in order to figure that out. But you shouldn't have to do that, obviously. So I would say that this is still a learning process, and I appreciate the comments today, and it brought forward by a member of council that we can't, if public input period is at committee of the wholes only, then we can't cancel them. So I think that we will continue to adapt as we move forward. I wouldn't say that it's not working. I would say we're still learning and we're going to improve it. And I heard a willingness from council certainly today to improve that. So thanks for your comments. If anyone else wants to add anything. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To answer Joseph's question, I would say, from my point of view, personally, that it's too early to tell. And again, I would say, from my point of view, that this is a process that we're working through. Will have and will subsequently make suggestions on how to improve it. I'm certainly of the objective that there is adequate public discourse and involvement with council. I think we can still see some areas where the current system or the old system doesn't work very well. And there's room for improvement there as well. So it may be tweaking our current system and making additions to accentuate that current system. So I don't know if it's working yet, but I personally, and I'm sure actually, I don't want to speak for all of council, but it's really my impression that the rest of council is committed to this process to be an improvement, irrespective of the trips and stumbles along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, thanks for the question, Joseph.
Just another quick comment. So going back to the whole process of this, where Mr. Barry used some vocabulary that I still kind of stumbled on, going from what was it, democracy to efficiency. Kind of sounds scary in a sense, but I know what he means. Going from teenager to adulthood, I understand that too. Our OCP, we're looking for young people's input. I'm thinking, how does that go over the teenagers? They want to go from teenager to adulthood. Well, we're looking for their input. So vocabulary is important in how you word it. And so just so we understand that that's not the case, we're not trying to overlook or negate your voice. We're actually interested. So vocabulary is very important in what you say and how it's said. And I think Mr. Barry's words were kind of, even though they were understood what he meant, could be miscued as being something where he says, well, hey, we don't want to hear from you. We're just going to go ahead and do business. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Okay, not seeing any other members of the public. Neil will allow you to come up for one more question if you can confirm it's going to be a question. I don't think it's 3 and 3 and 3. I don't think they stack like that.
Nice.
Tried to beat you to that. I always look forward to Councillor Patola's input. But when you got up here, I got to say this because I wondered what was going on. When you got up here and said, I'm not speaking as a council member, I'm speaking as a member of the public. And you went on and you had valid things. I didn't agree with them all. And then I put my hand up as a member of the public because I wanted my chance to speak too. And I wasn't recognized. I wasn't recognized. So there's your out if you want to.
Thank you. We're going to not let him do that again. Okay, everyone, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Patola. All in favor? Carried. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.